Welcome. So tonight we're going to talk about cravings, and we're going to talk a little bit about reducing those unhealthy cravings, and hopefully a little bit about what some of those cravings mean. You may know already, but what they're indicating that it might be deficient or an excess in your body. So let's dig right on into how to decrease unhealthy cravings. We always like to bring this up. It's time to address some of these things, and there are definitely natural ways to do it. I mean, gosh, right now when it comes to cravings, there's this amazing drug that seems like everyone's trying to take that's going to just reduce you from wanting to eat, and you're going to be a supermodel in like 4 months or whatever it is. But these GLP-1 drugs, can affect cravings on a hormonal level, but definitely have some side effects, and that's more and more coming out. As about anything that has a miracle cure usually has a miracle destruction in the back end. So just be careful with those things. But we're going to try to address these things for you. As a chiropractor, we talk about this. The biggest thing is that for most of my patients, inflammation is part of the journey. We need to reduce inflammation. If I'm adjusting someone on the table and their body isn't just saying, oh yeah, that's where I need to adjust, and it moves, and we're freely being able to release the joints, there's typically inflammation. In some way or another, there's inflammation. So very simple but mechanistic level, I'll say, is in order to get the most out of your treatment is to reduce your inflammation. Will get you more movement more often, and you'll be able to hold the adjustments longer. So that's why we talk about this. A food craving is typically defined as an intense desire to eat a specific food. Usually that food, though, comes down to like the basic senses you have, but it's either fatty, salty, or has high in sugar. So it's sweet, it's salty, or it has a lot of fat. And our bodies were built to crave these things to stay alive in certain ways because they will fuel certain parts of our body, but in an excess, they can become a huge problem. And because we can access any of those tastes very easily in our society, it makes it very hard to regulate and to balance, our diets and our cravings. Cravings tend to stem from both physical and psychological factors. So most cravings very rarely are just a need for, a chemical, or just because you must have it mentally, that you psychologically have to have that food. It's typically both things working to cause that craving. The more intense both of those are, the more intense the craving. There's deficiencies and hormonal imbalances or low blood sugar, we'll say, to tighten up the idea. But when we have these physical cravings, there's typically your body could need a certain nutrient, all right, or vitamin, mineral. There could be a hormonal imbalance. Mostly we look at blood sugar for this, but if your blood sugar is dropping, your body's going to have to crave something sweet typically to bring it back up. Because the simplest way to get blood sugar back into regulation is something that gets in your blood very fast, sugar. And if you look at like a soda, a drink of soda or pop, the high fructose corn syrup, which is in most of those things, gets in your blood even faster than like raw sugar would. So that's where the addictions come from to some degree. It can pass that blood-brain barrier, the stomach, very quickly, almost like alcohol does, soaking some of those sugars. So it's not even a process. Like a fruit has fiber and other nutrients. There's other minerals in that fruit, but mostly the fiber and the sugar that's in the fruit combine to slowly get into your blood versus some sort of a drink that has a lot of sugar in it. There's no fiber. It just goes right in. Okay, which tells your brain, woohoo, that was a really good source for that energy I needed. So your brain remembers that, and this is where the psychological stuff can come from. Lack of sleep and dehydration can cause people to be hungry, to have cravings. So this is where, sleep is so important, but it's been said that sleep is the last domino to fall. Sleep isn't usually the problem. It's the last domino to fall that states that there's a lot of other underlying problems, okay? And when we do our sleep workshops, we'll get into that. Dehydration. There's so many people who have had weight loss success by just getting more water in their bodies because they weren't hungry, they were thirsty so often. But this is, a lot of the reasons we look at these things. Glycogen, is a source of energy, and that's what the body needs for energy. So when you're needing that, usually sugar is the simplest source to do some of that. So if you're tired, you eat sugar. Let's get into psychological cravings a little bit. So you got the physical ones, you got psychological cravings. Stress, emotions, or memories can all trigger cravings, all of them. Example might be a craving for ice cream after something stressful. I mean, we've all seen the movies, we've all probably been part of that. So, this is something because a stressful day is also linked to the fact that comfort and relaxation that the ice cream brings. There's a certain release of chemicals in your brain. It's kind of like you said, well, that stress is now over. I can decompress. And so your brain knows I only decompress when I'm eating ice cream. And that's where these psychological cravings start to connect, right? Repetition and habit is the other way that this happens psychologically, right? Your brain learns to expect certain food at certain times. It's the evening, I had a tough day. You go do your thing. Could be foods, could be alcohol, could be whatever it is. But your brain knows that this is that timing. And so it is preparing you for that. This is where the psychological fact of those come in. There's something called hyperpalpable foods. When we eat certain foods, especially those with the enjoyable qualities of sweetness, saltiness, richness, the neurons in the reward centers of your brain become very active, creating a highly positive feeling or pleasure. So hyperpalpable foods basically lead to dopamine, or this hyperpalpable or pleasure sense. Short term, doesn't last, okay? But those foods create more dopamine in those areas of the brain. And usually in response to these foods, and you get more of that release than you typically do from natural foods, like even fruits and vegetables. So when we have a craving, there's some simple things to try to do. It'd just be like if you're having an emotion, you say, okay, I'm just going to count backwards real quick before I react. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sometimes just counting backwards can reset your immediate reaction. So the first thing is if you can say, okay, I know I could just go to the fridge right now, but what type of craving is this? Like, does it seem like it's an emotional craving? Is it more physical? Like what type of food am I craving, right? Pause for a second, try to regulate your system. Breath work that we've talked about many times, probably one of the simplest ways to do that. Maybe do some gentle stretching and a little bit of breath work. Drink some water, try to, get some water in you and say, do I still have this craving? Still having a craving, like I have to eat something here. Okay, body, I can't just ignore this. I need to eat something. Trying to choose healthy alternatives would be like your 4th step. And that 5th step would be try to figure out how to prevent those future cravings in the first place. What is it that you might need to do? And everyone might be individual there. But for most people, it would be on the 2 high ends of the physical and the psychological. The physical would be keeping the blood sugar more regulated throughout the day. So if you think you're doing a good job by just not eating, by the end of the day, you're probably going to crave some junk. Okay, it's just going to be easier. And if you're busy and you don't have any plans, you're going to eat whatever's there and easy, and that's usually not food that's good. Okay. On the psychological sense, if you know you're having, it's going to be a stressful day, it's been a stressful day, trying to do some things that start to regulate throughout that day or ahead of time. There's even nice little supplements. We carry some different ones that you can take, even drops, almost like you take a Xanax. You can take just supplements. And if that could calm enough down, it might kind of reduce some of the extreme cravings in the evening. But you kind of can do that in a regulated way, not like with drugs. Okay. So just think about that. Identifying the cause. Ask yourself the questions before you do anything else, really, is, am I physically hungry? If so, eat a balanced meal or snack. Nut butter and an apple or something is a great little snack if that's what it need. If you already had a meal, nut butters and some fruit, those are good. They're nuts and fruit. Next question is, am I craving something because of emotions or stress or just bored? These are things, if you can slow down enough to just even ask yourself these things, those can be huge things that you have some self-realization about. Okay. And did I see or smell or hear about the food that's targeting this craving? Take the pause. So, we try to identify, then we take the pause. And many addiction specialists say that cravings tend to last anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. So if you can even hold out for 30 minutes, it might be gone. It might seem like an eternity for some things, but 30 minutes could have a huge impact, on things. And that's in reality a very small amount of time, right? Even 5 minutes. Just give it to 5 minutes, dude. All right, maybe you say, I'm going to have that Snickers bar, but first I'm going to do 5 minutes of breath work or whatever. And if I'm still hungry, I'll eat the Snickers. But your brain always is going to be on a reward center. So you can't just go in all or none, because ultimately your brain's just going to be like, thanks for no rewards. I'm going to go find my rewards and I know where to find them. So you have to work with the psychology, but give it time. That's the number 2 thing, is the pause. That's probably one of the simplest things. Trying to do a walk. Like I said, you can even say, I'm going to go do something that's kind of a healthy thing, and I do get the reward if I want it. Still afterwards. Regulating your body, very important. To combat and prevent cravings, your body, when your nervous system's more regulated, it has less of a need for other stimulants. Okay? Exercise, sunlight, meditation, rewarding for non-food activities like we talked about. Music and social connections are also really great. Make sure that you eat enough protein, plant-based fibers, to look for plant-based fiber options and healthy fats. Drink enough water, get enough sleep. If you are still craving things, here's some simple things that are healthier alternatives for the 3 main things. If you want carbs, if you want salty foods, if you want sweet foods, here's some of the things. Sweet, dark chocolate, especially dark chocolate that has very low added amount of sugar, you have to watch, because it still could say dark chocolate, but it still have a decent amount of sugar. And just know, if chocolate is a big craving, I don't know if we'll get to it, so I'm going to state it. It has very high magnesium. So if chocolate is being craved because of a physical need, then one of the first things you want to do is make sure that you are taking magnesium, about 300 milligrams milligrams a day. Fruit, with some nut butter, like we said, is great. Greek yogurt with berries, herbal teas with some cinnamon or vanilla. And what I was saying about the chocolate, though, too, now you can buy chocolate that has they're natural sweeteners, but they're safer for you than all the artificial stuff. Lily's is one of the brands. They have a lot less sugar, period, in them, but they also have some ways to make it taste better. But they use stevia. It's all processed to some degree. So understand this. You probably can't get the sweet. If I just chewed on a stevia leaf, there's no way it tastes like the drops, right? Or whatever they process. Same thing with about anything. I mean, if you need it, it's better than what's the other brand. But just know your body's still gonna have to process something here. Okay, it's not just eating what your body was built to eat. Salty things, look for nuts and seeds. Avocado, again, with some salt would be wonderful. Olives, pickles. A lot of people say pickles. A lot of times it's because of their deficiency in minerals in their body. So when you're looking at like things for salt, know that a lot of times that's because of mineral deficiency. The other reason is stress. So your adrenal glands, they need that sodium and calcium, or the sodium and chloride. That a lot of times, if you're craving a lot of salty foods because your adrenal glands are overworked, which is usually due to overwhelming stress. And so the salt is something that very helpful for the adrenal glands. It doesn't need that, but you want to be careful about what kind of salt you're getting. We usually recommend, if you're getting salt added into your diet, we usually recommend Celtic sea salt. That's what we like the most. It's mined out of the ocean. It's just dried in the sun. The other thing would be carbs. And this is usually then where usually blood sugar is probably dipping. And so the carbs are usually to get that blood sugar back up. So that stress can affect your blood sugar. Blood sugar is affected by all the hormones, and it affects all your hormones. So if your hormones feel like they're out of balance and your sugar's out of balance, it's like a double whammy. And it's no one's fault. It's very complicated. But the carbs, when you feel like you need the carbs, is because your blood sugar probably isn't very regulated. So you need to get something in there. The whole grains are going to be better because there's more fiber. So the sugar isn't going to get in your blood as quick as like a white piece of bread. The other thing, again, with the avocado, we keep adding that fat because it slows it down. Oatmeal is pretty high in fiber. There's a lot of debate about oatmeal being good, bad. It just bothers me, so I don't eat it. But it is more fiber than other things you can buy, versus like Captain Crunch or something, or Cheerios. Cinnamon is really good at regulating blood sugar, so adding cinnamon to things is very helpful. Brown rice or quinoa is going to be better than white rice or jasmines and stuff. It's going to get in your blood a little easier. Sweet potato fries, they're just kind of your last full option of carbs. So any cleanses that we've ever done for really limiting carbs, sweet potatoes are like the max of allowable carbs. So stick with some of these things. But remember what these mean. Ultimately, the system's probably stressed, the blood sugar's out of balance, or you are just deficient in some nutrients. That's usually part of that. So when it comes to foods and cravings, definitely prep and prevent. Absolutely. Because I'm telling you, I feel like most people, the blood sugar gets out of whack because they didn't kind of have their meals planned out every couple hours. For most people need that. Some people can intermittent fast for a long time. That's good. But a lot of people really shouldn't or can't. You need smaller meals throughout the day, more fiber, less carbs, get your proteins in there. So if you have those planned out and you've got it ready, it's no biggie. Portion treat, these things out, eating straight, from the package. Be careful with treats and snacks and those kinds of things. Keep those tempting foods out of the house. And that's what's hard sometimes in a lot of houses. You've got a lot of different diets and people who aren't, they're not all going to maybe be able to take advantage, do this process. It makes it hard. Because that means that some of the stuff's probably still around. So we're always big into trying to find partners and trying to keep it clean for the house. It is hard, especially more kids and different things. The 5-minute rule, huge, the cravings. What I'd like you to do just mentally, I'm just going to ask the room here. If you had to just look at, tomorrow, is there one thing or one little tip or tool or thing that you think you could implement tomorrow that you think would help a possible craving that you have? Is there one thing that you heard tonight that you'd be like, well, I could probably do that tomorrow? Is there something you can think of?
Yep.
Something you can think of that quickly? Anything yeah. But, for yourself, try to do something that is committing to that next level for you. Rather than just hearing the info, try to make some change. There's got to be something you could do. Even if it's tomorrow, you're a good person, you're a good girl, you're a good boy, you did something tomorrow that was positive. Maybe you don't do it the next day, but you did something. And then you can build on that. And there are people in your lives, though, that ultimately, they need some accountability for their bodies. They need to start probably making some changes physically, and they don't really know where to start, or they've probably been so frustrated because nothing works. So if there are people who know that we can always try to help you in inviting them in, there's lots of ways we can do that. But we know that a community or people that you're surrounding yourself with that are happier and healthier, have less cravings, that are more physically feel better, it's going to be better and easier to be around, right? And that's what we want. And we want that for everybody, not just people in our office, but everywhere else. So this is a little topic, but to me, it makes me think of just all the things that we deal with. And everyone wants your attention. They all want you to do buy this or do that, for their own good. But, I ultimately know that your best when you're taking care of yourself in the right ways and not listen to all the scatter and chatter. So every week we'll hear and try to clear that out, okay? Thank you guys for being here. Have a good night.